The room went dead silent. My sister had just shouted across the briefing hall, "You don't belong here, you'll get people killed." My fists clenched, my throat burned, but before I could answer, a tall, battle-hardened colonel turned slowly toward her. His voice cut through the tension like a blade, "Madam Valkyrie?" My sister's face drained of color. The rain had just started when I stepped off the transport truck and onto the gravel lot of Fort Bragg's Delta compound. The air smelled like wet earth and diesel, and the sky was a bruised gray. My boots felt heavier than they should have. Not because of the weight, but because I knew every step was leading me toward the one person I wasn't ready to face, my sister that we'd grown up together in the same small house, eating the same dinners, sharing the same last name, but that was where the similarities ended. Michelle Lang was the kind of person who made everything look effortless. In high school, she'd been captain of the track team, top of the debate club, and the one our father bragged about to his friends. I was the other one. The younger sister with decent grades and an average athletic record. Nothing special. At least, that's how Michelle saw me. When she joined the military, she rose fast. Special Forces fast. She was deployed to dangerous zones before she was 25, racking up commendations and a reputation for being the best at whatever she touched. I stayed in her shadow for years, until I made a decision that would change everything. I signed up for the toughest path I could find, the road to Delta Force. The selection process nearly broke me. Hell, it broke most people. I watched strong men crumble after days of carrying overloaded packs through freezing swamps. I pushed through injuries that should have sidelined me. I passed tests that stripped people down to their core. When I finally got my orders, report to Delta Command, I knew I had done something that would shock Michelle to her core, but standing here now, watching the armed guard wave me through the final checkpoint, I wondered if I was ready for the storm I was about to walk into. The compound was quiet in that eerie, military way, people moving with purpose, nothing wasted. I followed a staff sergeant through narrow hallways until we reached a briefing room. And there she was. Michelle sat near the front, uniform perfect. Hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. She was leaning toward another operator, speaking in low tones, but when she saw me, her entire body went rigid. For a long moment, she didn't say a word. Then she smirked, like she just remembered an inside joke, and looked away. I took a seat toward the back, keeping my eyes forward. A few other operators glanced at me, not curious, not hostile, just calculating. They didn't know me yet. That was fine. I'd learned a long time ago that first impressions could be rebuilt, but only if you back them up with action. The briefing started. Colonel Harrigan walked in, tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who could make a room go silent without saying a word. He began outlining an upcoming operation, details redacted, of course, but even the vague points made it clear, this was dangerous work. The kind where mistakes cost lives. I was scribbling notes when Michelle's voice cut through the air. "Sir," she said, standing up, "I need to raise a concern." The colonel looked up from his file. "Go ahead, Captain Lang." She turned to face him, then glanced toward me. "I don't believe every member of this team is ready for this mission." The room went still. My pen froze mid-word. I could feel every eye shift toward me, like heat on my skin. "Be specific, Captain," Harrigan said, his tone even. Michelle didn't flinch. "She doesn't belong here," she said, her voice sharp enough to draw blood. "This isn't a place for experiments. People will die if we pretend otherwise." I felt the words like a punch, but I didn't move. My hands were steady on the table, my eyes locked on the colonel. This was her game: provoke me, make me lose composure in front of the people who would judge me for it. The colonel's gaze flicked between us, his expression unreadable. Then, after a pause that felt like a lifetime, his voice came low and deliberate. "Madam Valkyrie?" A ripple of confusion passed through the room. Michelle's confidence faltered, just slightly, but I saw it. My code name. One that wasn't given lightly. One that carried a history she didn't know, and just like that, the balance shifted. Michelle's face tightened, the faintest twitch in her jaw betraying that she knew the weight of what the colonel had just said, even if she didn't know the full story. Valkyrie wasn't a name you picked for yourself. It wasn't some cool call sign handed out casually. In Delta, a codename was earned in the field, usually after a mission where your actions tipped the balance between victory and disaster. You didn't get it unless you'd done something that people whispered about for years afterward. And mine. Mine came from a night I never talked about. I could see Michelle's eyes dart as if she was trying to do the math, to figure out when, where, and how I'd earned it. The truth was, she couldn't. That operation was locked under multiple layers of classification, known only to a handful of people at the Pentagon and the operators who'd been there. She hadn't been one of them. Colonel Harrigan kept his eyes on her. Captain Lang, are you suggesting the operator codenamed Valkyrie isn't qualified to stand on your team? Michelle opened her mouth, then closed it. She wasn't stupid. She knew this was a trap, that questioning a codename was questioning the colonel's judgment, the chain of command, and the very vetting system Delta lived by. No, sir, she finally said, voice tight. Good, Harrigan replied. Because, in case anyone in this room is unclear, Valkyrie has a confirmed mission success rate of 100%. Not 99. 100. And her last operation saved the lives of 5 operators, 2 hostages, and an allied diplomat. The room shifted. You could feel it, the subtle recalibration of how people looked at me. A few glances now carried a hint of respect, or maybe curiosity. Michelle stayed standing for a moment too long before sitting back down. She didn't look at me again for the rest of the briefing. Afterward, the operators filtered out, voices low. I packed my notepad. Slowly, giving Michelle time to leave first. But she lingered. When the room was almost empty, she turned toward me. I don't care what nickname they gave you, she said, her voice low and cold. You're still my little sister. And I still know you. You don't belong here. I met her stare without blinking. You don't know me as well as you think you do. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't reply. She walked out, boots hitting the tile like gunshots. I waited until the hallway was clear before heading toward the operators' lounge. A few of the guys were there, leaning over a map, talking quietly. One of them, a tall, wiry man with eyes that missed nothing, looked up as I walked in. So you're Valkyrie, he said. Not a question, more like a statement of fact. Last I checked, I said. He smirked. I heard about Berlin. Berlin. My chest tightened for half a second before I forced it away. That was the mission. The one that had burned the name into me. I didn't know how much he'd heard. Rumors in Delta had a way of twisting into something almost unrecognizable, but I wasn't about to feed the fire. You heard wrong, I said, keeping my voice light. He just grinned. We'll see. That night in the barracks, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The rain had picked up, tapping against the metal roof in an uneven rhythm. My thoughts kept circling back to Michelle. The way she'd looked at me, not just with contempt, but with fear. She wanted me gone, but there was something else under that. Like she knew that if I stayed, things between us would never be the same, and maybe she was right, because deep down, I wasn't here just to serve. I was here to prove something, to her, to the unit, and maybe to myself. The codename wasn't just a badge. It was a reminder of the night I had crossed a line I could never uncross. The night I had become someone my sister wouldn't even recognize, the night I had become Valkyrie. Berlin was cold that night, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones and stayed there. The streets glistened under a thin sheen of rain, reflecting the amber glow of the streetlights. We moved in silence, for operators dressed in civilian clothes, blending into the shadows. The mission was simple on paper: extract 2 hostages being held by a violent separatist group in an abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of the city. But in reality, nothing about it was simple. The building was heavily guarded, the hostages' location uncertain, and our intel sketchy at best. I wasn't even supposed to lead that op. Our team leader, Calloway, was one of the best, calm. Under pressure, methodical, the guy you wanted calling the shots. But 10 minutes into the operation, everything went sideways. We were on our way in through a side alley when a sniper round cracked past us, shattering a brick wall inches from my head. Calloway went down hard, blood pooling under his shoulder. The comms lit up with chaos, but training kicked in before fear had a chance to take root. I took over. Not because I wanted to, but because there was no time to wait for orders. We split into two elements. I took Lopez, our breacher, and moved toward the west entrance where the guards were thinner. The other two covered the east. Every step inside was a gamble. We didn't know where the hostages were, and any sound could give us away. My boots crunched over broken glass as we cleared the first hallway. The building smelled of damp concrete and something metallic. Like old blood. Somewhere above us, faint voices echoed, muffled and urgent. Lopez glanced at me, and I signaled for him to hold. We crept up a rusted staircase, each step groaning under our weight. At the landing, I spotted a lone guard posted by a heavy steel door. I raised my suppressed pistol, took the shot, and caught him before his body hit the ground. Inside, the room was dimly lit by a single hanging bulb. Two figures sat tied to chairs, their faces bruised but alive, the hostages. Relief hit for a fraction of a second before reality snapped back. We still had to get them out. The extraction route we'd planned was now useless. The sniper had the east side locked down, and gunfire had erupted in the south hallway where our second team was pinned. We were trapped in the middle of a hornet's nest. I made a split-second decision. We'd take the roof. It wasn't ideal, it was exposed, slippery from the rain, and a single mistake could get us all killed. But it was our only shot. We cut the hostages loose, moving fast. Lopez went up first, then helped pull them up as I covered the rear. The sound of boots pounding the stairwell below us sent adrenaline surging through my veins. I turned and fired down the narrow steps, dropping two attackers before ducking through the rooftop hatch. The wind hit me like a wall. From up there, the city stretched out like a glittering maze, beautiful and indifferent. The plan was to make it to the adjacent building, where our extraction vehicle could get close enough for a pickup. The gap between the rooftops wasn't wide, but the slick surface made it dangerous. Lopez jumped first, then one hostage, then the other. I was last. Just as I landed on the far side, a burst of gunfire tore into the edge of the roof behind me. Shouts rang out, but we didn't stop moving. By the time we reached the extraction point, my legs were burning, my lungs raw. The van's side door slid open, and we shoved the hostages inside. I took one last look back at the rooftop we'd just crossed. Figures were gathering there, too late to stop us. The door slammed shut, and we sped into the night. Back at the safe house, Calloway was patched up and already demanding a debrief. Harrigan listened quietly as Lopez recounted the events, but when he got to the rooftop escape, he looked at me and said, "You earned yourself a name tonight." I didn't understand at first. Then he said it. Valkyrie. The one who carries the fallen to safety. You didn't just bring them home, you brought all of us back. It wasn't pride I felt in that moment. It was the weight of knowing I'd done what had to be done, even when it meant taking risks that could have ended me. That night in Berlin became the shadow I carried everywhere, a reminder that in the chaos, you either rise, or you disappear. The jungle felt alive in a way that made your skin crawl. Every sound carried a question: was that a bird, or the crunch of boots through wet foliage? The air was thick, humid, and heavy with the scent of rotting leaves. Sweat slid down my back as I adjusted the strap of my rifle and glanced at Michelle. She was about 10 meters ahead, moving with the same sharp precision she'd always had. Scanning the path like she could see threats hidden behind the green. We'd been moving together for hours, forced into the same fire team by Colonel Harrigan's orders. Work together, he'd said, in a tone that left no room for argument. Neither of us liked it. The mission was a hostage recovery. 3 aid workers captured by a guerrilla group deep inside the jungle. Intel placed them in a makeshift camp near a river bend, guarded by at least a dozen armed men. We were a small, fast-moving team meant to get in and out before the enemy even realized we were there. On paper, it was straightforward. But nothing in the jungle ever stayed straightforward for long. It started to go wrong just after we crossed the river. The water was waist deep and sluggish, and every step sent silt swirling around our legs. I kept my weapon high, eyes sweeping the tree line. That's when the first shot cracked through the air. It hit the water inches from my right side, splashing mud and foam into my face. Michelle dropped instantly, taking cover behind a half-submerged log. I followed her lead, heart hammering as more rounds tore into the river. The ambush was quick and brutal, shouts in a language I didn't understand, flashes of movement. Between the trees, left flank. Michelle called out, her voice sharp but steady. We fired in bursts, aiming for the muzzle flashes. The rest of our team spread out, returning fire and pushing toward the shore. My mind went into the same place it had in Berlin, that cold, clear focus where the world narrows down to what needs to happen next. We broke through their line, forcing them back long enough to regroup on dry ground, but we moved fast after that, knowing the noise would draw reinforcements. The jungle seemed to close in around us, every leaf and branch dripping water onto our gear. By the time we reached the edge of the enemy camp, the light was fading, casting long shadows that danced in the glow of their campfires. Through my scope, I counted 6 guards visible, which meant the other 6 were somewhere we couldn't see. Michelle crouched beside me, pointing toward a small tent near the center. That's where they'll keep the hostages, she whispered. Her voice was tight but calm, and for the first time in years, I caught a glimpse of the sister I'd looked up to when we were kids, confident, sure, in control. I gave a single nod. We moved in sync without even talking. I covered her as she crept toward the first guard, taking him down silently. Then she covered me while I slipped behind another, my knife doing the work in silence. It was fast, clean, and deadly. The kind of work Delta trained you for but didn't talk about afterward. We were almost to the 10 when the situation unraveled. A burst of gunfire erupted from the far side of the camp, followed by shouting. One of our teammates had been spotted. The camp exploded into chaos, men grabbing weapons, yelling orders, lights flashing on. Michelle sprinted for the tent as I laid down cover fire. She disappeared inside, and seconds later re-emerged with the 3 hostages in tow, their hands still bound up. We ran for the tree line, the jungle swallowing us as bullets snapped through the air around us. That's when I heard it, the sound of Michelle's weapon jamming. She cursed under her breath, fumbling to clear it, the hostages huddled behind her. A figure burst from the shadows, raising his rifle toward her. I didn't think. I moved. My shot took him before he could fire, the crack echoing through the trees. Michelle's eyes flicked to me for the briefest moment, no words, but something passed between us. We made it to the extraction point breathless and soaked, the rotor wash from the incoming helicopter whipping the trees into a frenzy. As we lifted off, the camp below shrinking into nothing, Michelle sat across from me, the hostages between us. Her gaze lingered, just for a second, before she looked away. For the first time, I didn't see contempt in her eyes. I saw something that looked a lot like respect, even if she wasn't ready to admit it yet. The helicopter ride back was a blur of noise and wind. The hostages sat huddled on one side, wrapped in thermal blankets, their eyes still wide with shock. Michelle sat across from me, her rifle resting between her knees, staring out into the black night beyond the open door. I could still feel the adrenaline buzzing through my veins, every muscle tight from the fight. The image of that guerrilla fighter aiming at her replayed in my head, and how close she'd come to never walking away from that jungle. When we touched down at the forward operating base, the night air was cooler, calmer. The medics whisked the hostages away, and our team headed to debrief. Colonel Harrigan stood waiting near the operations tent, his expression unreadable. He scanned us one by one before his gaze landed on Michelle. "Good work," he said simply. Then he looked at me. Valkyrie. It wasn't just the name, it was the way he said it. Solid, certain. A statement, not a greeting. The kind of tone that told everyone within earshot exactly where I stood. Michelle heard it too. Her eyes shifted, just slightly, and I caught something in them I hadn't seen before, acceptance, edged with something almost like guilt, inside. The debrief tent, Harrigan ran us through the mission step by step. When we reached the point where Michelle's weapon had jammed, Lopez spoke up before I could. Valkyrie saved her, he said plainly. Would have been over in seconds if she hadn't moved. The room went quiet. Michelle's jaw flexed, and she didn't look at me. After the meeting broke up, I stayed behind to strip and clean my rifle. The repetitive motion was grounding, wipe, oil, reassemble. I didn't hear her come in until she spoke. You always clean your weapon this fast after a mission? I didn't look up. Old habit. There was a long pause, just the soft clink of metal between us. Finally, she said, I was wrong. I stopped mid-motion. Slowly, I lifted my head. Michelle was standing there, arms crossed, her expression guarded but her voice steady. Back in that briefing room, I said you didn't belong here. I said you'd get people killed. Her eyes held mine, unflinching now. But tonight, I wouldn't have made it out without you. The hostages wouldn't have either. I searched her face for sarcasm, for the sting of some backhanded comment. There was none. Just the raw truth, stripped of ego. You've earned your place here, she continued. More than I ever thought you would. And I'm proud of you. The last words came out like they'd been sitting in her throat for years. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then I set the rifle aside and stood. You don't have to be proud, I said quietly. You just have to stop trying to get me out of here. A faint smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Deal. We walked out of the tent together, the compound quiet except for the distant hum of generators. Overhead, the stars were sharp and bright, scattered across the dark sky like a map of somewhere better. For the first time since I'd set foot in this place, the weight between us felt lighter. The next morning, as the sun came up over the treeline, we stood side by side in the yard, waiting for Harrigan's orders. The other operators gathered, talking in low voices, and I caught a few glances my way. Not curious anymore. Not calculating. Just knowing. Word had already spread. When Harrigan emerged, he looked over the team, then fixed his eyes on me. Valkyrie, he said, the name cutting clean through the morning air. It wasn't a question, and it wasn't for me alone, it was for everyone to hear. A reminder. Michelle didn't say anything, but as we fell into formation, she nudged my shoulder lightly, the way she used to when we were kids lining up for a race. I glanced at her, and for the first time, she was smiling, not the sharp, competitive smile I'd always known, but something warmer. We moved out together, side by side. And I realized that proving myself to Michelle had never really been about earning her respect. It had been about showing her, and myself, that I could stand in this world on my own terms. That I belonged here, in Delta, not because I was her sister, but because I was Valkyrie, and for the first time, I knew she believed it too. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to The Silent Revenge for more thrilling tales you won't forget.